Hi, and welcome to this quick introduction to the Mercator terrain editing suite for Unity. We're going to create a simple island scene using Mercator's GPU-based terrain stamping. I've already created an empty project in Unity 2018.1. Let's quickly go over the player settings. I've set my color space to linear. Whatever you choose, please do it before you import Mercator, because changing that will require a re-import of the textures, and that might take some time. Also down here, there is the allow unsafe code option. You need to tick that for Mercator to run in Unity 2018. Also, I've adjusted my lighting settings. If you don't have that tab, go to Window, Lighting, Settings. And I've disabled basically all lighting over here, so it doesn't rebake all the time while we're changing the terrain. Okay, let's add a new terrain to our scene and adjust its settings. You want to set the pixel error to 1, so you get a good level of detail all the time. Also, you will want to set the base map distance to very high, because we're not going to use it anyway. And for the material, we're going to use one of the Mercator example materials. The Mercator add stack seems pretty good for what we're about to do. And there will be another tutorial on how to create these materials yourself. Also in the settings down here, let's adjust the terrain height a little, because 600 seems pretty excessive, so let's just use 200 over here. Okay, next let's add the Mercator terrain master on the GameObject 3D object. You can find that. And drag the terrain into this field over here in the inspector. Be careful, once you do that, Mercator will start overriding whatever content is in your terrain. So if you're not starting from scratch like we do, but if you already have something in your terrain, Mercator will override it. So make sure you have a proper backup. So let's create a stamp by clicking on that little button over here and quickly go over these components in the inspector over here. So first of all, you get the Mercator terrain stamp, which is the heart of the terrain stamp, plus 2 Mercator texture components that are referenced here. So the upper one is the height texture, and the lower one is the mask texture. To see the effect of a stamp, let's add a texture, set a height texture over here. All our textures are prefixed with the Mercator label, so you can quickly find them. Let's, for example, use the Mercator Clouds 1, just a basic noise texture, if you will. So you can right away see the stamp in effect. Now, what can you do with that? You can use all the basic transform tools that Unity offers to adjust the transform of the stamp, basically. So first of all, let's just move the stamp around a little. You can see that wherever the stamp is on the terrain, it is affected. You can also move it up, down, and it will basically stamp height to the terrain. You can also scale the stamp. You can also non-uniformly scale it to get the desired effect. And you can also rotate it to create slopes on your terrain. The second texture down here basically limits the effect of your stamp to a certain region, so it's a mask basically. For example, let's use the Mercator circle mask. That means that only in this circle region over here the stamp will have any effect. Okay, let's start again. And we're going to create a basic ocean floor. So let's select the cloud texture again, and let's scale it way down, because the ocean floor doesn't need so much height difference. And then let's bring it all the way down until it basically starts clipping here. We don't want it to clip though, so move it up just a little. Okay, so this will be the basic floor of the ocean. I can make that even less high. So just to give some texture to the basic terrain, I can also scale it up a little. Okay, that's good. And it's good practice to right away name your stamps a little, so you don't lose the overview of what's happening. So let's call that ocean floor. Okay, let's add another stamp. Now we're gonna quickly draft out the landmass of the island that we're about to create. So let's again use the cloud texture. You will find that with only a few textures, you can already do some pretty cool and versatile stuff. So, not clouds, I want the circle. So here it is. Let's scale that down. And let's just basically try to find a shape, a basic shape for the island that we want to create. Okay, duplicate that a couple of times. Okay, that looks good. Now maybe I want this a little longer here. You can see that I'm already clipping here on the end of my terrain, so I can just select all of them and I can, oops, not go to pivot, but center. I can scale all of this down and I can move all of them together. It's no problem. You're pretty flexible in the way that you can work with these stems. Okay, so adjust that a little. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, I am gonna do one more thing. I'm just gonna add an empty over here. I will add that roughly in the center. And I will call that basic landmass. I will just group those together a little. So later on I can find my way around the history. Because, you know, unlike other terrain editing tools, Mercator makes it really easy for you to adjust things later on. So let's create another stem. Let's say I want to make like a volcano on this thing. So again, the clouds and again the circle over here. So we basically just want to make a pretty big mountain here in the center. Whoop. And then let's duplicate that to basically punch a hole inside of this, something like that. I don't know. So now I got this volcano here, but if I now feel that the landmass underneath doesn't really fit that volcano, for example, this edge over here, I don't really like that. So later on, I might want to change this, and that is no problem because I can just go back, I can find out which stem it was, and I can just move stuff around a little. Okay, so let's keep that like volcano and volcano hole, I guess. Okay, well, now I don't really like that edge still. I want to add some more depth to this, and it's always a good idea to use some real world terrain. We're shipping some high textures that are based on real world terrain with Mercator. For example, let's check out this one here. That is a height data scan from the real world, and you can use that to create effect in your terrains. Again, let's type Mercator, and let's select one of the squares over here as a mask this time. So there is that, and now let's not use the global for once, but use the local. So you're really not limited in the way that you want to transform your stems. Okay, so that looks, I don't know if it does look real, but it looks pretty cool to me. So that's already something. Let's call this Sonoma Ridges. Okay. One thing I find myself doing a lot is if I see a particular space on the terrain where I think that a certain gameplay feature could be placed, then I need to flatten it out or adjust it specifically to my needs. So again, let's create a stem and let's scale it down right away because now we're only working on this small part over here. So let's say that here at the foot of this volcano, I would like a city to be placed. Okay, so I need this region to be fairly flat, which is no problem because I can just do that by basically placing a stamp, and you can even set the height to 0 so that view is a little bit better. And maybe I don't want it to be perfectly flat, but I want it to be at a slight angle. And next I can just set a mask to smooth out the edges, basically. So I will not select the circle, but I will select the square again. Okay, and you can see that this whole area has become a little bit flatter. So makes sense to experiment with, how much hardness you can get away, how much you need for your gameplay elements to be placed. One other thing you might want to do, this is kind of a workaround for now, but sometimes you want to create paths or ways on your terrain, and you can basically do that by using a similar technique. So, for example, let's say we want to create a kind of flat path down here and just want to smoothen that out a little. So, say we have this, and now we're gonna head down a little towards the beach. So you can just duplicate your stamp all the time and use Unity's local transform basically to create a path that will lead us down to the beach. Okay. So as I said, this is a kind of a workaround. Of course, there is other tools that allow you to create full road networks and this kind of stuff. So this is really just for, simply carving out a small path and simple things like that. Finally, let's look at the remaining options of the Mercator terrain stamp. We have a couple of blend modes. You already know the default mode, which is basically an alpha blend of your stamp over what has been there previously. We have the raise mode that will just raise your terrain and never lower it, and the opposite of that, the lower mode that will just lower and never raise, allowing you to put in some nice craters, for example, into your existing terrain. And last but not least, we have the modulate mode that allows you to basically add both stems together, so you can add some detail on top of the terrain that is already there. Switch back to default. Oh, nice. Okay. You cannot only enable or disable a stamp, but you can also change its opacity. So let's say I don't want this stamp to contribute as much, but I like the general direction, so I can just drag down the opacity and find the sweet spot in between that I feel is good. Then for the height texture, we have the tiling and offset that you may know from default Unity materials, for example, Unity standard shader, for example. You can adjust the tiling to use only a smaller portion of the texture or repeat it. So if we feel that these hills are too many, let's just put this down to 0.25, and we get these these softer, more rolling hills. If you do that, you might also want to adjust the offset to use a different portion of the texture to experiment with what looks good for you. Or you can do the opposite and, I don't know, put in something like 4 to get this really high frequency peaks here. Of course, you can also do non-uniform things to get put some special marks on your terrain. And then for the high texture and the mask texture both, there is the mask power that you can use to play around and basically add some contrast to the way the texture works.